So I want to suggest 3 reasons that we might not be able to do things, or that we might be feeling stuck. And the first one is fear. So this can seem quite obvious, but when we do something new, when we step out of our comfort zone, fear will almost always show up. This is part of being human, because anything that implies the unknown, any kind of change, even something that we want, it freaks out our very conservative brain, because our brain was built on wanting to have stability, have something that's known, because that's what meant safety back in our caveman and woman days. So basically, if you're feeling afraid, this is a good signal that you're doing something that's allowing you to step out of your comfort zone, and maybe something that actually matters to you. So maybe instead of seeing fear as your enemy, as something that you have to fight or get rid of, maybe you can allow that fear to be there, allow that fear to hang out, to know that your mind will come up with things like, what if I fail? What if I'm not good enough? Or even, what if I succeed? What if I'm seen? All these kind of fears will show up. They're completely normal, and they're okay. They don't have to stop you from still taking action if this really matters to you. So that's the first point, about maybe I'm so lazy is actually about I'm afraid. The second point is maybe I'm so lazy could actually mean I'm feeling really overwhelmed. I feel like there's so much information out there and I don't know where to start, or I don't know what to do next. And this is also a very normal reaction, because we're just overwhelmed with the information. There's so much information out there right now. We have access to so much stuff that's going on the internet, and what we hear from friends and family. And so overwhelm can really show up as a way to tell us that, yeah, there's too much information, or our ambitions, our goals are way too big, and that just stops us from actually doing anything, because we don't even know where to start. It's like this fog, and we don't know where the lighthouse is and what direction we want to head towards. So for overwhelm, I think there's 2 things that can be really helpful. The first one is asking yourself, what is my intention here? And that can help you to redefine, what is it that I actually want to do? What really matters to me in this situation? And to use that as a lighthouse towards which you can head, sort of break through that fog and head towards that lighthouse. And the second thing with overwhelm or confusion is to actually break down what you want to do into really small steps. And just allow yourself to not do everything at once, but to just start with just one really small step and to see where you go from there. So it's actually almost like you're taking off some of the pressure that you might be putting on yourself, because we tend to be really good at putting a lot of pressure on ourselves. And maybe also with overwhelm, something that can be helpful is asking for help, because sometimes it can be useful to have someone from the outside who's also on your team, who's there to guide you, support you, help you see things differently. And asking for help, asking a friend for help, asking a professional for help can actually be a way to get things done much more effectively than trying to do everything yourself. The third point, which I think is really important, is maybe I'm so lazy actually means this doesn't matter to me enough. And this is something that is really hard to admit to ourselves sometimes, because we can like the idea of doing something or achieving something, but the reality is we're not willing to have the full experience of it. And the reality also in life with everything that we do is there's always an element of discomfort that shows up with something. So for example, if you're going to the gym, there's going to be a lot of discomfort, physical discomfort, the time constraints, having to push yourself to do something, doing a certain type of exercise. And if making room for that discomfort is not important enough for the gain that you're going to get from it, then it doesn't matter to you enough. It's almost like, a balance, those old school scales. If the discomfort is too much for the gain that you might get from doing this, then maybe a better way to go about it is to admit to yourself, this doesn't matter to me enough. And that doesn't always mean just giving up on what it is that you wanted to do, but maybe bringing in some honesty and compassion towards yourself and asking yourself, well, what was it about going to the gym, for example, that was important to me? What actually mattered to me about that? Because going to the gym is a goal, but what is the value behind it? And maybe the value behind it for you is about moving your body. And so when you're honest with yourself and you let go of, okay, maybe going to the gym isn't working for me, but this value around moving my body is still important to me, how can I do this differently? How can I find a different way to move towards this value? Then maybe you can be more creative and come up with options like, well, I'm going to do a dance class instead, or I'm going to get a subscription to the yoga studio instead of the gym because that actually is much more in line with how I want to move my body. Or maybe it's about, organizing hikes with your friends more often. Whatever it is, isn't so important, but the important part is actually more about being honest with yourself about, maybe this doesn't matter to me enough, and what does actually matter to me more? How can I make the gain that I get from something more important than, have more weight than the effort and the discomfort that will show up with it? So those are 3 ways that I think are more effective with working with this thought of I'm so lazy, I can't ever do anything, I'm always procrastinating, to turn them into, looking at yourself with more honesty, with curiosity, and asking yourself, am I afraid? Am I feeling overwhelmed? Or does this matter to me enough?